Good morning to you. Thank you so much for staying here on the AM show. It's now time to bring you our big stories, and it's focusing on the issue about the finance minister's sack. The past few weeks have seen him come under a lot of criticism and pressure. He's been asked to resign, and majority MPs in Parliament asked the president to sack him earlier this week. Well, the president has asked them to allow Mr. Ofori to complete negotiations with the IMF and prepare the 2023 budget statement before they can continue the conversation about whether he's sacked or he stays. But some Ghanaians have described this move by the president as one in which he's choosing his party over the state. Today we'll discuss how and when that happens and what the ramifications are if a person places political affiliation or partisan interest ahead of the state. Also, we'll be talking about that speech delivered by former President John Dramani Mahama, building the Ghana we want. Well, he's been saying a couple of things, including the president replacing the finance minister. But not only that, he wants the economic management team to be reconstituted. He also wants government to stop collateralizing statutory funds. And he says that it must unsecuritize them as part of debt restructuring. He believes that this will give government more money. He has also been asking government to collapse what he refers to as the wasteful Free SHS Secretariat, the One District, One Factory Secretariat. And he's been talking about other agencies like MASLOG, the GEA, the NEIP. He believes that they should be merged into one entity under the Employment Ministry. Well, there's a lot of things to digest here this morning. We've been joined by Dr. Daniel Appiah. He's a political governance and public administration expert at the University of Ghana Business School. Professor Baffuor Agyeman Duah is CEO of the Baffuor Foundation. He would also be part of this conversation. Let me welcome you, gentlemen, to the show. Thanks for making time to be part.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Do I have Prof on as well?
Yes, this is me, Agyeman Duah.
All right. Okay. Let me start with you, Prof. There have been calls, and they keep coming. Yesterday, we heard one from the former president, for the president to sack the finance minister. The president thinks that this is not the time, in the middle of an IMF deal, and also just about to deliver the 2023 budgets. There are those who say, I mean, if the institution is working properly, the negotiations should go on without the presence of the finance minister. What are your quick thoughts on that?
Well, thank you. I think, first of all, the president may have a point. I think he may be worried that the ongoing negotiations and other assignments that the finance minister has been undertaking may be interrupted and perhaps have some negative impact. Maybe that is his thinking, and that's why he may be pleading for time for the finance minister to complete some of these national assignments. So in that respect, I could have some sympathy for that. But, you know, I don't think it's necessary for the president to tie this major national, I would say, event around one person. We do not build institutions, or a nation cannot put its future in the hands or around one person. Because, as you know, that will not, I mean, certainly in governance, you don't build that around individuals. And the perfect example, perhaps, is when the British, the former British Chancellor of the Exchequer, Kofi Kwarteng, was in Washington negotiating on behalf of the British government, headed by Les Strauss at the time. But once it became necessary for Kofi Kwarteng to be sacked, so to speak, she called him and he flew in, and as soon as he got in, he gave him his dismissal letter. And the British system continued. And this has happened many times, especially if you recall during the Trump era. Former Secretary of State was flying to perform a certain important assignment in Africa. As he was flying somewhere over Egypt, he called him and told him to just turn around and come back. It was right. So displacing one official will not necessarily undermine the efforts of a nation to achieve certain ends. And that is clear-cut. And I think if you look at the intensity of the public outcry, if you gauge the mood of people about this issue, I think the finance minister himself, he perhaps saved the president from the pain of making this decision by voluntarily resigning.
But Prof, why you use the expression to save the president the pain? And that's the sentiments a lot of people share, is that the president appears to, beyond the excuse of allowing him to finish the negotiations with the IMF, appears to be attached in a certain way. Of course, we know that they're relatives, they have family ties. So there are those who say that there's somebody people think is underperforming. There are those who've even suggested that his continuous stay in office as a finance minister is dwindling confidence in the economy, for which reason we're seeing some of the things we're seeing, especially with the exchange rate. So they say, why would you sacrifice that over a certain emotional attachment to all of this?
You made a point. Certainly, the president appears to be deeply attached emotionally to the finance minister for reasons that all of us know, that they are cousins and all. And certainly, it would be improper to place such a very parochial interest above a national need, you know? And that's why I think a lot of people are worried that the president seems to be resisting this very massive public outcry for a change. You know, when I think in Britain, for instance, when there was a change at the Treasury, that is the finance minister, when the new guy came on, quickly the pound started rallying against the dollar. And even in Ghana, I understand that over the past 2 or so days, there appear to have been some stability in the currency because of the expectation that there will be a change. You know, the currency movement on the market normally is influenced very much by the expectations of people, investors. When something is perceived generally to be not working and there's going to be a change, the mood and expectations will change and affect, the currency. So I think, personally, I do not know why the president is being very insistent on keeping him until perhaps the budget is read. Because I think psychologically it's not even good for the finance minister with this kind of pressure, as if he has committed some crime. And I think with this hanging over his head, I'm not even sure he's going to have the peace of mind for him to do whatever that the president wants him to do before he goes away. So if I were the president, I think this is the time I'll bite the bullet and simply decide that, look, for this situation, please, let's make a change. And I can assure you, if a change is made and a person who has more credibility in the eyes of the public is put in place, you might see some very interesting, positive change in the way the currency in particular and the whole economy might turn. So I personally, I think that it's about time the president became decisive on this very matter that seems to be agitating almost all Ghanaians, and I don't think the president needs to be hanging on this argument anymore.
Right, Prof. Let me bring in Dr. Appiah now. Doc, so clearly there's a problem who needs multiple solutions. We've spoken to the experts and we've spoken to politicians. But for many people, they think the person at the helm of affairs at our finance ministry must go. In fact, the former president, John Dramani Mahama, extends it beyond Ken Ofori-Atta. He says the entire economic management team must be reconstituted. Your quick thoughts on that additional suggestion?
Thank you very much, and thanks to our listeners and viewers. The first one concerns whether or not Ken Ofori-Atta should go. As we've heard from the NPP MPs in Parliament, we've heard about the deal that they have reached with the president to the extent that the president says allow the minister to stay and then continue with the negotiations, and afterwards allow the minister to stay and finish the budget and the appropriations bill, and then afterwards then I will act on your demand to ask him to leave. What we have not heard so far is the posture or the perspective of the IMF. The IMF negotiations require very difficult and hard choices that the government must make. Perhaps, maybe the IMF have got confidence more in Ken Ofori-Attah's ability to make the difficult choices that the IMF wishes the government to make, after which Ken Ofori-Attah will then hand over to another person who may not be in a position to make those difficult choices if a new finance minister were to be at the helm of affairs now. So maybe the IMF has got so much confidence in the ability of Ken Ofori-Attah to make the difficult choices now.
Sorry, permit me to interject, but is it left to the IMF to decide for us as a people what we want? Because clearly, sitting here, I can tell you that I have sampled the views of experts, of the people, the MPs who belong to the NPP itself. I appreciate the perspective that you're bringing, but as a people, should it be left to an external body to make that decision for us? Shouldn't the people's desire override political, personal, or other interests?
I think what we should be asking is whether we can walk away from the IMF now and still keep our economy going. And the answer is no. So if the answer is no, then at the end of the day, you have to take the position of the IMF very, very seriously.
So are you telling me now that the IMF can tell us, for example, that we want Ken Ofori-Attah to lead this? Forgive me, what if he gets indisposed or is unable to move or work? Then what happens?
Well, for now, we know that he's not indisposed. But the point that I am emphasizing is that now we find ourselves in a ditch, and then we've placed all our hopes on getting the IMF bailout. So what we need to understand is that the IMF is now in a very, very powerful position at the moment in this negotiation. And we've heard from different parties. What we don't know is the view of the IMF. And what I'm emphasizing is that the choices on the table are very, very difficult at the end of the day to make. Do the IMF trust Ken Ofori-Attah to make those hard choices now and afterwards leave the scene and hand it over to another person? If yes, and then the IMF now have got more confidence in the ability of Ken to lead that, then there will be that kind of backroom kind of negotiations that, come on, keep Ken at the negotiation table until we finish. And mind you, government and IMF all want a speedy resolution to the negotiation at the end of the day. And the second thing that I keep emphasizing is the fact that it's the issue of trust. Who do you trust to make the hard and difficult choices that have been placed on the table? So we need to know the perspective or the position of the IMF. And for now, I've not heard anything from the IMF suggesting that they do not have confidence in the ability of Ken to make the hard choices. Of course, if Ken were to leave the situation, I will be happy. But what I'm saying is that the IMF has become a very, very powerful actor now at the negotiation table. And what is their position? If they think that Ken can make the choices that they want Ghana to make, then they will be pushing for Ken to remain. And we need to look at that angle as well.
But that's interesting, because I mean, I'm just thinking about the sovereignty of us as a country and whether or not the IMF even has the power to do what you're suggesting. But this then brings me to my next question. I remember when the former president of the United States, Barack Obama, visited Ghana, he spoke about strengthening our institutions. Clearly, from what you're telling me, it appears then that everything is centered on one man, isn't it?
Well, not that. Looking at the institutions, that we have to deal with the problem. First, let's look at the structure of parliament. You have 137, you have a hung parliament. And so the first thing is, if the president asks Ken Ofori-Attah to go now, definitely a new finance minister will have to be appointed. The question that we have to ask ourselves is whether that the current parliament will be able to speedily approve a new finance minister to complete the negotiations. This one we don't know. So it will be very important that both the NPP and then the minority perhaps will have to reach a deal about the appointment of a new finance minister and then the timelines for approving a new finance minister for both the government and then the opposition and then the IMF to be confident that even if Ken goes tomorrow and then a new person has been nominated, the approval of the new person is going to be speedy. The next thing that we have to look at the institutional perspective is if you look at last year, 2021's budget, 2021's budget was thrown away by the minority, and then we all know the brouhaha that emerged from that. And then later the majority came in and then reinstated it, and the thing went to court back and forth. And so you are looking at an institution that itself is not very stable. It is in crisis. I'm talking about the legislature. And so there is no strong confidence in the ability of the legislature to help us now really to resolve the matters quickly. And so you are faced now with a legislature in crisis and then an IMF negotiation that you want to complete on time. And so at the end of the day, which one do you choose? That's why I said, if the IMF have got confidence in the ability of Ken to make the hard choices, the president is more likely to say, well, Ken remain because at the end of the day, I don't have confidence in the ability of Parliament to resolve the issues now. At the same time, they also want to avoid last year's kind of situation that affected the budget. And so the institution that we have now currently in Parliament is not one that the president can really have great confidence in helping to resolve the issues. And we need to also avert our minds to that fact.
Right. Let me bring in now Professor Lord Mensah, who is also with the University of Ghana Business School. Thank you so much for joining the program, Prof. I remember having this conversation with you a couple of weeks ago, and for yourself and some other experts, this was going to come. Let me first find out from you the manner in which the NPP MPs, made their statement so open, so candid and clear. Did that come to you as a surprise?
I'm not surprised at all because I think before they came to public, I presume they would have done some background, attempt to get the finance minister, off the position that he finds himself. You see, we shouldn't take that call from the majority for granted because the market or the economy thrives on information. And over the past 7 months, the silence by the economic management team, especially the finance minister, the Bank of Ghana governor, and then the vice president, clearly has allowed the market to feed on its own information because information is very, very important in driving the economic, dynamics. Now, we saw the exchange rate going up, we saw the inflation going up and all those, but no one was coming out to speak. And clearly, the market had to feed on itself to think about the next line of action. And the market knows very well, the market has learned that over the years, prices will always go up. So within 7 months or so, exchange rate has moved from 6 point something all the way to, the black market was talking about 15% without any information from any of these, team members. So effectively, the signals weren't good. And for majority, 86 of them, to go to Parliament and say that we don't want finance minister anymore. And as a result of that, the finance minister must go. They have also studied to know that our problem is as a result of the finance minister. And clearly it's on the grounds. The aggressive posture of the finance minister's economic management is what has brought us this far. The finance minister started borrowing, and that borrowing has not led to any economic improvement, and which he should have stopped. And so for me, for the backbenchers of the parliament to go and ask for the head of the finance minister is not surprising at all. It's not surprising because if you are to cut all the various economic indicators.
Hello, Prof.
That you come to for this fourth republic. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sorry, we lost you for a few seconds. Please continue.
Okay, so what I'm saying is that if we should cut the economic indicators and align them to the various finance ministers across regimes, you will get to understand that the current finance minister has performed badly.
Right.
You know, the last time inflation, went above treasury bills, that was around the 95s thereabout. By that time, we had not, started our, fourth republic democracy that we're talking about here with that kind of political stability that we've been enjoying.
But Prof, what do you say? What do you say to those who say that the conditions under which this finance minister worked may not be similar to the ones that you're comparing this morning? They raised the issue of COVID-19, for example, which really slowed down our economy, not only ours, but many across the world. They talk about the Russia-Ukraine war. And we've even heard from the IMF boss herself, who mentioned that Ghana's crisis was not largely because of our local policy or economic policy, but it was due to external factors and stress. Later, we learned from the IMF that our inflation is largely domestic driven. So there are those who say the times are not the same, and so you cannot compare this dispensation to the others.
Can you hear me, please?
Yes, I can hear you. Did you hear my question, Prof?
Yes, you were asking whether I can easily compare,
Yeah, because there are those who say that dispensations are different.
Yeah, that is why, we normally in economics we quote in percentages. It takes into consideration all the relativities, the time relativities, the baseline relativities, and all those. So effectively, the performance is not clearly, good as, compared to earlier ministers. And that is why I'm not surprised they're calling for his head. And you can feel it in your own, homes and then in our own pocket. When you are paid salary, you are not sure of even your consumption in the next 2 weeks or the next 3 weeks. So effectively, it tells you that, yes, things are not going well, and it has got into our doorstep.
Well, so the president says, all right, I've heard you, but let's allow Mr. Ofori-Atta to finish the IMF negotiations and then prepare the 2023 budget. Then we can begin to talk even about whether he should stay or not. I just had a response from the other guests on the program, but let me take yours. There are those who say that this is more of an emotional decision that places party, family over the entire nation. Clearly, you are the expert, and you've drawn the link between the stay in office of the finance minister and what it does to the market and the confidence in our economy. Would you say the president took an emotional decision?
Yeah, I think the president is enjoying that kind of uncertainty hanging on the economy. Now, people cannot make a definite decision as to whether they should stay in Ghana or they should move out of Ghana. Investors are looking out what is likely to happen. If everybody knows that the current finance minister has not performed, and as a result of that, his own party people are calling for his head, why do you want to prolong the uncertainty? The president to call for the extension or to say that finance minister should finish his job as a negotiator for the IMF program, and then also to read the budget for us before we start talking about his exit. I think maybe the president is enjoying the kind of uncertainty hanging on the economy. Anyway, the finance minister, works in a team. We have economic management team. He himself alone is not the one negotiating with IMF. Unless maybe they tell me that it's only the finance minister negotiating with IMF, and as a result of that, when he exits, he may go with all the kind of information that we need. But from where I sit, if you're working with systems, if you're working with structures that we have in this economy, having an economic management team, the finance minister alone won't change anything. But when the finance minister was not around, who read the budget for us? Was it not JoyNews who read the budget? So for me, him as a person, if we're working with the systems and then working with the structures we have, the finance minister as a person for an extension or to say you should finish the IMF program, I think is hanging on the economy for long. And I'm not happy with that response that came from the president.
Would you say then that this is an admission, maybe not explicitly, but a subtle admission of what critics have been saying, that probably Mr. Ofori-Atta seems to be doing all the work and sidelining other members of the economic management team? I'm sure you've heard that on the streets.
Well, I've heard it, but I don't want to use that in my submission because I have to be clear and definite on some of these things that come out. I can tell you that, yes, indeed, looking at the dynamics, I was making a submission earlier and I went up. If you cut all the indicators and relate to the various finance ministers, this man has not done well. And as a result of that, he must go. And I wasn't expecting the finance minister to keep to tell us that.
Well, we seem to have a problem with Prof slide. We'll work on that. But let me bring in my other guests now for their quick thoughts on that, and then we will delve deeper into the submissions made by former President John Dramani Mahama last night. Professor Agyeman Duah, I would ask you that same question. Do you think that the president's decision to keep the finance minister still in office and the reasons he's attached to that gives credence to what critics say then, that our institutions are not working, we may not have a team working on our economic management, and it may be a sole-driven agenda by the finance minister in regards to getting the IMF deal and other economic measures being put in place?
In governance, it is dangerous to build the future of a society, in this case a country, around an individual. That's why democracy as a political system seeks to what you call full participation and multiplicity of institutions and people and ideas. So you cannot put a whole nation's future in the hands of one individual. So certainly, personally, from the perspective of governance, it is wrong for anybody to believe that the displacement of an individual can undermine a nation's effort. As simple as that. And it's on that principle that I think that Mr. President didn't give the proper response to the calls by his own parliamentarians. Look, just suppose, and God forbid, and this statement I'm making, I hope I'm not wrongly interpreted by anybody. God forbid, if Ken were to be very sick, become incapable of doing something tomorrow, does it mean that the negotiations with the World Bank will be suspended until he recovers? Does it mean that the management of the finances of this country will be suspended until he recovers? Still up. And again, this kind of issue, this insistence of an individual's soul, could be the reason why our institutions are weak. And you made a very interesting reference to Obama's state when he visited this country. That what you need are strong institutions, not strong men. An institution thrives on systems that are created to make it work. So anybody who wants to build an institution around an individual is bound to have some serious problems as it goes along. So I think this whole discussion is a very interesting one, and it's a very important one because for me, it goes beyond the finance minister. Because we are talking about how as a nation we build institutions and have confidence in the institutions rather than putting our trust in one individual. That is dangerous. So on that basis, in as much as I think the president may have his own good reasons for insisting on that, I think for the sake of the nation's development, we should not place the nation's future in the hands of one individual. So certainly, I think that, and again, whatever that they are negotiating at the IMF, it is not Ken Ofori-Attah's, what is it? It is not his personal interest that he's negotiating. He's negotiating on behalf of the nation. And I believe also he's not there alone. He has a team. And that team represents the collective interest of Ghana as appointed by the president. And the president is acting on behalf of the country. He's not acting on his own behalf.
Prof,
so I think this argument about it, so I think we should just leave it in the past. It's not relevant.
Right. So would you then say also that it's not fair to then put everything at the doorstep of the finance minister, since there's an existing economic management team for which the former president is asking a reconstitution? He says, let's reconstitute the entire team, because it appears that this goes beyond the finance minister.
You know, this is very interesting, because just 2 days ago, I had a very personal discussion with somebody. And that's exactly the conclusion I reached, or the two of us reached. Because this economy is not just Ken Ofori-Attah's economy. He's the finance minister, all right? But the key policy directives come from a collective, what we call the economic management team. So in fact, if the chief executor of policy finds himself in this, then of course the management team is also answerable to the challenge that we are having. Unfortunately, Ken, as the finance minister, the one that therefore everybody is either lambasting or making comments about it. It's the whole team. So even before former President Mahama spoke, I had already concluded that the whole management team must be reshuffled. And I think this presents a very fine opportunity for the president to seriously consider a reshuffle that he has held on for all this while. If he's able to bring fresh blood, some taste, a new kind of, he will bring new credibility to the whole process of managing our economy. So, yes, I mean, if a former President Mahama is making that point, fine, because I concluded on that some days before even he came out to speak. Because it makes sense. It's logical. It's logical. We cannot just single out Ken and sacrifice him. There was a team behind it.
Right. Dr. Appiah, if you're still on, clearly we don't know what the future holds with regards to Mr. Ofori-Attah's stay in office. The minority has done something in Parliament. It's filed a motion, a vote of censure, i.e. a vote of no confidence. And it is actually asking its members in Parliament who do not vote in agreement with this, saying that they would be expelled from the party, which means then that they would automatically lose their seats as a result. And so the minority is also pushing. We heard from Harun Idrisu, who is minority leader. He says that he's tried to speak to the majority side to try and get more people, because they would need the number of votes which goes beyond the number of minority MPs anyway. We don't know what the future holds, but clearly the times do not look good for Mr. Ken Ofori-Attah with this vote of censure. The Speaker of Parliament believes that the stabilization, the slight stabilization we are seeing with the CD is as a result of this vote of no confidence. What should the president be doing at this point? We've heard from him, but considering this latest move by the minority, what should he be doing?
Right. What the president should be doing now is looking at the agreements reached with the NPP MPs, that after the IMF negotiations, then he will act on their demand to kick out Ken Ofori-Attah. What he should be doing now is to look at what happened last year with the budget approval process and then now start negotiating with the opposition NDC on two things. One, about the person that the president intends to nominate to fill in the shoes of Ken Ofori-Atta when Ken Ofori-Atta goes. It's not a question of if Ken goes, it is a question of when. So that now they have to start negotiating and then reaching agreement about whether the person is acceptable to both sides of the house, so that they will be able to speed up the process of approving the nomination of the new finance minister. The second thing that the president should be doing now is also to start negotiating with the opposition NDC about the content of the budget that the government intends to present to the House, so that it will be able to avoid what happened last year. Because if the budget is not passed fast enough, then the speed that the president is looking forward to conclude both the IMF negotiations and then the passage of the budget will not be met. And so the president should be negotiating first with the opposition about the person who is going to fill in Ofori-Atta's shoes, and then second about the content of the budget. And this is also the opportunity for the NDC to actually exert its influence and then make sure that its preferences in terms of how the budget should look like, its preferences is felt in the content of the budget. So they should go beyond just coming up with a 9-line whip against the MPs to say that you have to vote in a certain way. And they themselves should go beyond and then start also drafting what they think should be within the budget, or their preferences that should be in the budget, so that we'll be able to navigate this process very fast. Because there are two major things that have brought us here. The first one is the economic crisis. The second one, which we've just discussed, is the fact that no one has got confidence in our current constitutional structure to push us forward. All eyes are now currently on the economic side. Meanwhile, the constitutional crisis that have brought us here remains. Baffuor Agyeman Duah has signaled that we need to reform the constitutional structure if you want to go forward. John Mahama has also signaled that we need to reform it. And I think that this is the time for all these negotiations to come on board. Unfortunately, from the president's side, there were two things that they said they will never do. The first one is they will never go to the IMF. The second one is he will never implement a comprehensive constitutional reform program. Unfortunately, with the IMF, they are there. And then the second one, which is the comprehensive constitutional reform program, is staring us right here. After the IMF deal is completed, the implementation of that, if it is not handled well, and if we do not give hope to the current generation that there is a better future with a constitutional reform, we are going to end up with a huge political crisis on our hands. And so these are things that the president should be negotiating currently with the opposition in parliament to give hope that there is a better future ahead.
Right. So yesterday at that program at the UPSA, where former President Mahama spoke, we also heard from the minority spokesperson on finance, Dr. Casey Alatoforson. He is predicting harder or harsher times ahead. He thinks that government will need about $200 billion to deal with what the future holds for this economy. Professor Lord Mensah, we need to present a debt restructuring program to the IMF as part of sealing our deal with the body. Here's what President Mahama thinks, former President Mahama thinks. He thinks that restructuring our debt should not only focus on local ones, but international ones as well. Do you agree?
Yeah, that's very true. But let me also come in on the keeping Ken Ofori-Atta's position or not. You see, the president should understand that the economic cost of keeping Ken Ofori-Atta will be more than the benefit that his position will give us if in case he should keep his position. And he should come out to take a bold decision that the man must go. It's as simple as that. The economic cost is so high because this is a finance minister who will tell us that we are not going to IMF. The next time we are going to IMF. The uncertainty that this minister has created over the years, and it keeps on, affecting the economy one way or the other in terms of decision making here and long-term decision making, it's so high. So for me, I think he should go. But let me come back to your question: whether debt restructuring should focus on, the local level debt or not. But then we better start from home anyway. And what the former president is calling for truth. Local debt is not much of a problem. Local debt, of course, we know very well that when it comes to restructuring, and I'm hoping the restructuring, the various financial institutions will be able to absorb, some of these haircuts by sacrificing part of their margins that they're expecting on some of these investments. Beyond that, we have to look, outside. There probably maybe the approach that they're adapting now is to, start with the local, to send a signal to the public, to the foreign debt that foreign creditors, that even in our local environment, we've been able to restructure our debt, and so therefore we anticipate that. But let's look at it this way. As we speak now, our coupon, bonds, the coupons on our bonds, the Ghanaian bond on the Euro bond market is selling about 40%, okay, which is not normal everywhere. So effectively, it tells you that once we start the debt restructuring, the coupon price of our debt, externally, is going to go up. So it's good to start home, but then we should send a signal that once we're done with the home debt restructuring, we are coming to the international, platform for negotiations. But let's also look at the timing. You see, maybe the debt restructuring at an external, level will be more convenient and more stronger if we are able to engage the IMF. That is why probably we may start at home, and then once we done and succeed by IMF and we start having this policy credibility and all those, we'll start negotiating with our creditors outside. So the timing is important, not just to say we should, debt restructure. If you go to the table with your external creditors, what are you going to put on the table? We need certain credibility. We need certain financial discipline. And it's only IMF that can provide that financial discipline for us to negotiate with our external, creditors. And that is why probably we are looking in-house before we start thinking about outside.
Right. I made reference to Dr. Cassiel Ato-Forsen's presentation before the former president spoke. He mentions that we will have harsher economic times ahead of us if their suggestions are not heeded. Do you think that's just a political rhetoric, or he has his statements grounded on facts?
No, the things they put out there, you see, I always talk about, yesterday we had 2 days before we had the governor of Bank of Ghana meeting the banks. What did they decide on? As we speak now, nothing has come out to the public. And I'm hoping that that is going to feed into the president's speech that is going to give on Sunday. If nothing comes out of it, that will allow the market to feed on itself. But trust me, we shouldn't think things are going to be, normal as, we used to be somewhere in January this year. The Ghanaian economy is now, feeding on itself. Because if you look at the structure of the economy, we'll be managing it with loans every time. This is the only time that we were not able to go to the Eurobond market to have, a loan into our economy, and that has moved the exchange rate to the extent that we have it now. But we have the natural state of the Ghanaian economy without Eurobond loan, and that is what we're facing now. So if the market continues to close on us, then this is the state of the Ghanaian economy. Let's put it that way. So the hardship that we're facing now is not something that we should anticipate to go out easily. We should understand that in economics, it is easy to slip in the dip. When you are coming out from the dip, it takes harsh measures. And the things that the former president outlined are things that I wish it will come from the current president, and that would have given some kind of confidence, reducing cutting down some expenditures, reducing your ministers to 65, ensuring that some institutions that are running parallel to existing structures that we have, you collapse them and all those are realistic things that, I wish it would come from the president. And on the Sunday's speech, I believe that he should lift some of these things, and make sure that he implements them for us to, lift ourselves back from the dip that we've find ourselves again.
Beyond his suggestion to government, the former president also had a suggestion for all of us as citizens. He speaks, for example, about buying locally produced food items, eating local, Operation Feed Yourself, and all those kind of things. I remember a couple of weeks back when we were having this conversation about our current economic crisis, I asked one of our experts what advice he had for people. As we speak now, there are homes that are struggling. People are wondering how to manage their domestic economies, okay? So how they manage their finances in their homes. Your quick thoughts on that suggestion by the former president, and if there's anything that is working for you or anything that the books say about situations like this and how individuals can cope, we won't mind hearing it from you at all.
Yeah, I think clearly at this time it's about consuming something locally made. And for me, I'm the type that personally I like the local stuff. I eat ampisi, I eat banku, I eat things that are mostly locally made. So we should change our consumption pattern. Clearly, we should change our consumption pattern. And once we are in our homes, we should try and grow some basic stuff like kontomire and all those around us that can, substitute these foreign things that we eat. I think, he's calling for Ghanaians to reorient their taste. And reorientation of our taste does not come a fortnight. Because, if you look at a builder, getting into this perfume rice that we normally mention. I went to Fansfrim, and I can tell you, before I went to Fansfrim, I didn't know anything like perfume rice. But you see some of my colleagues coming in with, perfume rice, and then, the noise they make about it, and even when they are cooking, the aroma around it, and all those. You feel like, having a touch of foreign rice. So when things get better, everybody may want to eat the foreign rice. That is if it is available. Let me put it that way. That is if it's available. But then, why don't we come out with a conscious, policy to say that, look, there are a lot of local manufacturing, rice on the market, which would taste the same way as, the foreign, rice that we have. We've started growing this paddy rice, variety in our local environment. And so on the market, you get this paddy rice, which is the same rice coming from the Thailand and all those, which at the end of the day will save us foreign exchange. Because if you consume goods that are produced locally, it's a way of, supplying foreign exchange into the market because you won't use money to go and import again. So for me, we need a conscious, effort. And whilst you are doing that, you try to place some restrictions on the importation. The unfortunate thing is that, our political dispensation has, gotten to a point where businessmen find themselves into politics. And they try to be financiers of this, politics. So immediately their party comes to power, it's an advantage to expand their business. And that is why a lot of, goods are imported. And, we cannot stop them. We cannot really roll out policies that will stop this importation. We can do it gradually. If we make it effort that at the end of the day, in the next 2 years, planting for food and jobs, we are going to reduce rice importation by 40%. The next 2 years, we are going to reduce it by, 60%. Gradually build up to 80%, and then leave the 20% for importation. It should go a long way. And when the typical Ghanaian goes to the market and he sees the price differential as far as the local rice and then the foreign rice is concerned, it should be, a rational consumer will always, pick the one with the cheaper, cost. And then also, that has almost the same taste as the foreign one. That will, gradually reduce the importation. But if we sit and say, we should change our taste back and then ensure that we eat, local rice But when the person goes to the market and he sees the foreign rice, he'll buy the foreign rice, reduce the availability of the foreign rice, and then Ghanaians will have no choice. Let me tell you, this year, I've never eaten foreign rice. All the rice I've been eating in my house has been local rice from Lagos. So effectively, it is an option, and I think it's an option of making available local rice. If the local rice are available, and provide incentives. I know a lot of people are into, rice farming and all those. Those who are into rice farming, give them incentives to expand. The taxes that you take, use it to provide incentives for them to expand more, so that the local rice will be available in town. And once they are available on our market and prices are cheaper, a rational consumer will always go for it.
And I think that local producers really acted swiftly with regards to this. I've seen on social media people promoting oil made in Ghana. I didn't know that that is granite oil produced in commercial quantities, and so people are really taking advantage of this to market what they produce locally. But let me come to you, Professor Agyeman Duah, even as we wrap up this conversation. We heard Professor Lord Mensah speak about the seeming silence of government, and experts have had reason to complain about that, especially with the IMF deal and what government's real policy is with addressing this situation. They say government has not been proactive enough. Yesterday, we heard from the former president, John Dramani Mahama. On Sunday, we will hear from the president of the Republic of Ghana, President Akufo-Addo. Prof, as you sit back and look at all these things, bearing in mind the context that has been created, how does it make you feel, the former president speaking ahead of the president?
Well, politically, I don't know what to say, because politicians are smart. They always look for ways to preempt certain things. So no, I think he did right. But listening to him and what my good friend Lord Mensah and others have said, the fact is that over the years, our leaders have not had the courage to initiate certain policies that will restructure the economic base of our country. In fact, what we're experiencing today, we have to face it. It's not Akufo-Addo's creation. It's a creation of Ghanaians over the years. This whole notion of having what we call import-dependent economy, that we have decided to import everything in this country, including toothpaste, including tomato from the Sahelian countries, Burkina and others, including onions and all. We can go on there. Everything you go to the shops today, 80, 95, if not 98% will be things that are imported. That has been the problem. And I think, fortunately for us, there has been a moment in our country where a government did not secure IMF loans, where a government did not go around looking for Eurobonds. But at the same time, the country was able to produce enough rice and export rice to Burkina Faso, Chad, and other places. We have done it before. You see, so now today we are all talking about making my own contemporary, we have done it before. And the facts are there. Between 1972 to 78, the only government that never went to the IMF was the Champon government. And we have to find the reasons why. The reasons were simple. He initiated a development philosophy that he called self-reliance. It was within that context of self-reliance that I think he introduced the Operation Feed Yourself. Operation Feed Yourself. And that is the period that Ghana produced abundant rice. But we changed it radically to embark on importation, because the political elite over the years have benefited from that. Their own people are empowered to go bring in money, quick money, to the detriment of developing our domestic base. So, if the former president is now bringing that idea, I think it's a laudable one. But it must be done in such a way that we will change the development philosophy for our country.
there must be a cap to extent to which government will come in and borrow. And why can't government be very straight to people that, look, we know you need 10 hospitals, but at the moment we can't. We can do 2 or 3. Why do they come in when they want power to make promises? Promises that they know they can't fulfill because there's no money. Then they run to Europe or somewhere, IMF, and look for loans. And now we have hit the ceiling. We can't even go for loans anymore. And for me, it's a lesson that our political elites would learn. What we are going through today for me is good. It should teach us a lesson. So I'm hoping that maybe...
Hello, Prof?
Yeah, you hear me?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that with this experience, we can begin to put a one developmental strategy as a people. This thing about NDC, NPP, when they are in opposition, they see all the goodness of what we can do. They come up with all the beautiful ideas for it. When they get into power, they are different. We all know this. So, what will impress me will be for the key political players in this country to have a serious discussion with the nation at large for us to determine a new direction for the country's development.
Right.
And so that we can limit our overdependence on the external world.
I appreciate your time here this morning, Professor Baffuor Agyeman Duah, CEO of the Baffuor Foundation. We also had Dr. Daniel Appiah, Political Governance and Public Administration Lecturer at the University of Ghana Business School, and Professor Lord Mensah, who is a lecturer at the University of Ghana Business School. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time here this morning. Still on the show ahead, we will be having a conversation with the GRA. Remember the tax clearance certificate we spoke about and how they're digitizing the whole process? Well, we also have the e-tax invoice. I'll be back to tell you more about that. Do stay.